All right, so let's talk about matter. As we learned earlier, chemistry is a study of matter and the changes that matter undergoes. So the question becomes, what is matter? And matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So it's most of the things that you can touch, see, taste. Most of the things you're familiar with are states of matter. Matter, then the question becomes, what is matter made of? And matter is made up of atoms. And atoms come in different types depending on the type of element, right? And so the elements are the symbols that we see on the periodic table, and each different type of element has a different type of atom. So we could draw atoms as like circles with no filling, or circles that are filled in, and those would represent atoms of two different types of elements. We could also, draw another type of element, so we could have something like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, different elements on the periodic table. And so an atom is the smallest that you could break down an element and it would still have the properties of that element. So these atoms then can come together and form different compounds. If we have more than one atom connected to another by a chemical bond, it becomes a molecule. So you could have two atoms of the same type held together by a bond. For example, two oxygen atoms would be a diatomic molecule of oxygen. It would still represent that element, but instead of an atom, we would call it a molecule. Then you can have a compound, which is any time you have two or more different types of atoms bound together by chemical bonds. So we could have, two of these atoms with no filling in them and one that's filled in. And so we'd have two different types of atoms, so that would represent an actual compound. So those are the different things that we'll see with matter. So all matter is made up of atoms. Atoms come in different types. The different types that are available are the different elements. Those atoms then can be connected by chemical bonds, and you can have molecules once you have more than one atom together. So you can have a molecule that contains the same type of atom twice, or you can have a molecule where you have two different types of atoms, and that becomes a compound. So we said that chemistry is a study of matter and the changes that matter undergoes. So the changes that matter undergoes are two primary types. We have physical changes and chemical changes. And the main thing that distinguishes a physical change from a chemical change, in a physical change, no chemical bonds are broken. We have the same elements or compounds that we started with as that we ended with. In a chemical change, a new compound will be formed, so there's actually a rearrangement of the atoms from the start of the change to the end of the change. So we could kind of look at this pictorially. If we had a box in it and we had some different molecules in there, say we had some molecules that look like this, where we had two filled in circles and a not filled in circle. And then we had also in here some molecules of just the element. And then if we underwent a physical change afterwards, we might have this dissolved in this liquid, and afterwards we would end up separating the two from each other. But when you started, you had two of these molecules or compounds that had two filled in atoms and one not filled in. After the change, we still had two of these kind of molecules, and we have one of these and one of these. So no new compounds were formed. All we did was separate the two from each other. And this would be an example of a physical change. In a chemical change, for example, say we start with a similar starting point where we just have one type of compound in there. And then we undergo a chemical change, and afterwards, what we end up having looks a little different than what we started with now. So we've actually broken these chemical bonds here and made new chemical bonds, and now these two atoms are connected to each other. These two are connected and these two are connected. So we've actually formed new compounds, or we've destroyed this compound and made new molecules. So we've broken chemical bonds. So this would be an example of a chemical reaction. Now these atoms can kind of be either pure substances or mixtures. So if we have just a single type of compound or element, then what we have is a pure substance. So here we only have one type of molecule in there, one element, so that would be a pure substance. Here we would have a mixture because we have two different things. We have this this molecule of just one element, and then we have this compound. So we have a mixture of a compound and an element. Here we would have a pure substance, not a mixture, but it would be a pure substance would be a pure compound. So this would be, for example, if you had a pure water, all it would have in it is water molecules. So we can kind of make different things. We could have mixtures of different elements. So we could have something like this, where we have a mixture of two different types of elements, right? So we have no compounds. We have this element, and then this other type of element. So this would be a mixture of elements. We could also have a mixture of compounds, where we had a compound that looked like that, plus one that looks like this, so it's a little bit different compound. Or you could have a mixture of compounds and elements. So you should be able to draw these different things.